My name is Adam Stonebreaker, and this video is about hips. So we talk about hips a lot in yoga, but what are we talking about when we talk about hips? Well, I have a little model here. This is your pelvis. Yeah. These are your hip sockets on the side, and back here is what we call the sacrum, where the sacrum meets the hips, the hip bones. It's called the SI joint, or the sacroiliac joint, if you've heard of that before. And then this is our femur, so the upper bone of the leg, and it fits right in here to the hip socket. Now, with this hip socket, this is called a ball and socket joint, and this allows movement in all directions. So not only movement around like this, but also rotation. And so all of our walking, anytime we move our leg, it involves the hip. Now, just like many of the things in our lives, as I talked about in the spine video, is we get used to patterns of sitting, patterns of walking. And the body adapts to our normal ranges of motion. And when we're talking about connective tissue, or the tissue that goes around the joints, it will adapt to the minimum length needed to adapt to your specific lifestyle. So if you don't move your hips intentionally very much, then the tissue around the joint will actually shrink. And when the tissue shrinks, that limits our range of motion. And when we limit our range of motion like this, it begins to deteriorate the joint, or deteriorate the hip. And so just like everywhere on the body, we want to try to move in our natural range of motion, which is different than our normal range of motion. Our normal range of motion is how we move on a daily basis, or our patterns of movement. Our natural range of motion is where we're able to move. And so when we do things like yoga, or any type of expansive exercise that involves stretching or range of motion movement, we're doing that. We're going outside of our normal range of motion into our natural range of motion, which keeps our joints healthy, keeps them fluid, which can counteract arthritic conditions and deterioration of the joint, and just keeps the joints young. When we keep our joints fluid, they stay young, and they age much slower. So there's various poses in yin yoga that involve the hips. In fact, most of our poses in yin yoga involve the hips. And these tissues are bigger, they're more dense, they don't move as much, and so we approach them in a yin way, which is long-held postures, passive into a particular area. Now, something that's valuable to know is that when we don't move in our range of motion and our natural range of motion, and our range of motion goes down and down and down, when we are required to move outside of that range of motion, say to pick our keys up off the ground when we drop them, or when we fall, or when we have to reach up and get something, or anything that takes us outside of our normal range of motion, and we're limited in a particular joint, another place in the body has to make up for that limited range of motion. So in the case of the hips, when our hips are very limited, to make up for that limitation, lots of the movement goes into the lower back and the SI joint, or into the knees. And so the knees will overwork and the low back will overwork, just because the hips are really, really super tight. And so two of the most common pain areas in the body for most people is the low back, including the SI joints, and the knees. And that has a lot to do with our limited range of motion in our hips. So it's really, really super important and beneficial for us to start to move our hips in the full range of motion. Now, around the hip, there's various muscles that influence the hip. So there's no hip muscle. There's 4 groups of muscles around the hip that will influence the range of motion of the hip. And this is not something you need to know, but I'll just talk about them very briefly. So we have hamstrings in the back, which you're probably familiar with. We have quadriceps and hip flexors in the front. We have muscles on the inside of the legs called the groin muscles, or the adductors is their official name. And then we have glute muscles in the back, that influence the hips. All of these muscles move the legs around in various directions and move every time we take a step. They tend to get really tight because we use them a lot. They can be difficult to stretch if you don't intentionally stretch them. So I'm going to show you a few stretches here that will get into all of these areas, and that when done often will really help to expand your range of motion back into your natural range of motion, and which helps your normal everyday movement much easier, much more comfortable, and helps counteract a lot of that hip deterioration and that drying out of the hip sockets that I mentioned earlier. So the first thing we'll do is just get into the hamstrings a bit and do a pose we call a half butterfly. In yin yoga, we use the names are slightly different than you might be used to in a regular yoga class that you might go to. So we just call this half butterfly. So full butterfly was bringing the soles of the feet together with the knees out to the sides. Half butterfly is extending one leg and then bringing this foot to the inside of the thigh. If your hamstrings are tight, a couple of different things you can do. You can sit up on something. I usually sit up on a blanket or a bolster if I need to. Or you can put a blanket or a block underneath the knee. This little bend here will help loosen the hamstrings a bit. And then we just turn towards the leg. Don't have to be centered over the leg or anything like this. Just turn towards the leg, and then we just fold out over towards the leg. Yeah? You can be a little bit on the inside, you can be a little bit on the outside, you can be right over. It really doesn't matter. The important thing is that we're not cranking, we're not pulling, but that we're just nice and passive. Some people might put a block under the head here. That can be very useful. But really just folding forward is what's most important. Now, what we're trying to do here is feel the back of the leg. We'll naturally go when we're passive to the tightest point. So you might feel this in the hamstrings, you might feel this in the calf or somewhere around there. As long as it's getting into the back of the leg, that's what we're really concerned about. Very important in yin yoga is we relax the target area. So the target area is the hamstring, so we relax the leg. And you might notice when I relax my leg, my foot kind of drops out, and that's fine. Now what I'm trying to feel is the back of the leg. It'll vary where you feel it the most, but as long as you're feeling it in the back of the leg, that's what's most important. And then we just breathe. Especially emphasize the exhale. The exhale is what's going to help us relax the nervous system. And you might just, as you're in these postures, just utilize one of those meditation techniques that I've led you through before. So how does this feel? Where do you feel it? How do you feel it? You can hold this for 2-3 minutes. We want to hold it for at least 2 minutes. And then when you're finished, you just come out, and then we just come to the other side. You might take a moment just to regroup, and then move to the other leg. Now this side might be much different. You might feel it differently. You might feel it in a different area. That's perfectly fine. That's good. It's a good thing. We want to treat each side as separate. So we're not trying to feel each side the same. Settle in, rock a little bit, feel into it, and then just become passive and still and relaxed. And just spend some time with your hamstrings. I like to think of when we're targeting particular areas in the body, like, we're spending time with a friend, it takes time. Or if you want to have a good relationship, you spend time with that person you're trying to relate to. Same thing with the hamstrings or whatever part of the body you're trying to become friends with. You have to spend a little time. You have to show some care, show some kindness. And then when you're finished, you just come up. And then the next posture we do is just bringing the legs out wide. Now, this might be difficult because of limitations in the hamstrings or these inner leg muscles. So one thing you can do is bend the knees, put some type of block or soft cushion underneath each knee. You could also come into what we call butterfly. Again, we've already talked about that. But this time we bring the heels in a little bit tighter. And what we're trying to do is get into these muscles of the inner legs. Wherever you end up, it's okay. And then we just try to lift as much as we can, not super aggressively or militaristic. And then we just fold out. I usually just bring my hands down and gradually begin to come down, or I might just stay here the whole time. The important thing again is to relax here, and relax the breath. So we spend a little time with our inner leg muscles. And then after a few minutes there, hold that as long as you'd like to. Come up. And then we'll just come down to the back. We'll just walk our feet in. And then we'll just bring the right ankle over the left ankle. So this time, now we're targeting the glute muscles. Yeah, you could, maybe this is enough for you right here. You just stay like this. The other option is to reach your right arm through your legs, and then reach your left arm to the outside of the left leg. Pull the knee in, and then interlace the fingers around the left hamstrings. And then just pull in as needed. This eye of the needle. And you just relax here as best you can. Another option is to put something underneath this left foot so you can just set your left foot on it, like a block or a bolster, or even up against a wall. After a few minutes here, then you come down and just pause for a moment in neutral. And then you switch sides. So left ankle over right knee, reach through with the left arm, right arm around the outside, and pull in. And again, try to feel it here. So in the hip, outer hip, glutes area. Finished, you just come down like that. And then the next pose we'll do is we'll do a twist, but the intention here is going to be to stretch the quadriceps and the hip flexors. So I'll just lengthen my left leg out, pull the right knee in, and then I'm just going to draw the right knee over to the right. Now this might take a little planning, a little finagling, but you can use your strap here, but I'll show you how to not use your strap first. So what we do is bend this left leg, grab the left foot, and just kick into the right hand, which will pull the leg back, which will give you a nice stretch. Now it doesn't have to be very aggressive at all. In fact, we don't want it to be. You are trying to ease into the muscles. The way you would use the strap is you would just wrap it around the foot, or make a little loop in the strap, lasso the foot, and then kick into the strap. And then when you're finished, 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes there, come back to center, and then do the other side, lengthen the right leg out, left knee in, draw the left knee across the body, over, come way over onto that right hip, bend the leg, grab the foot, and then kick. Kick, and then also pull with this left hand. release that. Come back to center. Pause. Feel the breath. Let your body neutralize. And then when you're ready, just come back up gently to your seat. Or just lay flat for as long as you'd like to. Feel the body. Notice the effect of your practice. This is a really effective practice to just get into all those muscle groups around the hips. And I encourage you to do one or all of these postures a few times a week, if not more. And you'll find that you'll get, there will be a lot less pain in the knees and the lower back and the hips themselves if you just pay attention to them, pay attention to these muscles and be kind to them, become friends with them, and allow them to open back up to their potential. Thank you so much.